Well, the first thing you know that you're going on an op is when a chap comes down from the ops block on his bicycle, comes in, rattles the door, and he says, "Right, lads, you're on at 6 o'clock." And you know what you've got to do. Now, my job was to go in the cookhouse and pick up the cutlery box, big box, all the cutlery, pots, pans, and a box of dry rations. We had eggs, meat, bacon, potatoes, what veg they could get, a bit of cabbage, onions, and that was all packed in the box by the cookhouse. Well, the sergeant's mess. So you collect all that together, and then we'd all meet up at the headquarters at the ops block. You go in there and they tell you where you're going. Of course, the navigator's there, he's making all his notes of where he's got to go, course to set, you get all that information. Then the Met man comes in, he says, "Well, you'll be out there," he says, "you're going to the Arctic Circle," he says, "you've got to watch out for the icing." He said, "Things will get iced up," he said to the pilots, you know, they said, "so you'll have to, we used to cruise at about, operationally, at about 2,000 to 3,000 feet. That was our, and what we used to do was to fly to a certain point, which is estimated by the observer, navigator. He'd plot the courses, wind speed, direction, and you do what they call a box search. You fly so far that way, across there, down here, and you keep going round there. But you gradually extended it, so you covered a long strip. And of course, if there was any, as I said, if there was any reaction, they used to send us a signal to watch out, because they used to, I think they used a plane called a Condor, a German plane. I don't know whether it must have been a seaplane, because they used to send them out to try and pick up their chaps in the dinghies, you see.
Yeah.
But
well, getting back, you mentioned the boxes of rations.
the box of, oh, well, you're talking about the food.
So somebody's obviously responsible for preparing and cooking the food.
And cooking the food.
And how do you cook the food on a seaplane at 2,000 to 3,000 feet?
Well, on the starboard side, under the engineer's position, which is in that tower between the wing and the fuselage, the flight engineers used to be there, two of them, used to take it in turns. Although I've done a stint on it, and underneath there was a hot plate run on the electrics, and also a Primus stove. Now a Primus stove, okay, you have to put the paraffin in, pump it up and light it up, and it has a burner just like a gas ring. And you have to do the cooking. Well, I think the first trip, I think somebody else did it. And then for some unknown reason, I said to him one day, I said, "Oh, Jack Payne, a radio chap, my mate from Luton." I said, "Hey, Jack, I'm going to have a go at that." And thereafter, that was my job on the crew. And the first man you serve is the skipper. And we used to get up there, and he used to call, "Right, Lou, have you got the kettle on?" I says, "Yes, skipper." Be up there. He had the first cup of tea. After that, you timed it then, because we'd had a meal before we left, regardless of what time we left on ops. It could be 6 o'clock at night, 8 o'clock, according to what was required. So I think the meal I used to have before went off was Kellogg's cornflakes for some unknown reason. And they didn't come in packets, they were bloody great boxes at the end of the table. And you got your dish and scoop them out and put the milk on and sugar, and away you go.
So it wasn't a sustaining cooked breakfast, and yet you got the prospect of anywhere between 11 and 18 hours.
Yeah. So you have to divide it up.
Yeah.
Well, what I tried to do was, it was mostly beef, the meat. You didn't get sort of lamb and mutton chops and that. It was either, if you got a bit of good meat, you could do steaks. I've fried steaks on there. Or what you do is you make stew. That's the best thing to do, because you can cook it all in one pot.
Yeah.
Cook your meat, put your veg in, and I think we used to have also cubes in there as well. So
would you say that you were pretty good at the cooking? Was there
oh
any
yeah,
appreciation shown by the crew for
oh,
what you did?
oh yeah. Eventually, in fact, I think I did more cooking than I did anything else. Certainly more than firing the guns. Anyway, the lads decided towards the end, that particular crew, which incidentally my mate Jack Payne, who came from Luton, a lovely guy he was, my best pal. In fact, I went out to look. He was on a different crew that time, and they were lost off the Faroes. They got one signal, nothing else. So I volunteered to go out in the old stripped out cat. We had one, no guns, no depth chart or anything.
Really?
Just got a few dinghies in there that we could drop off or land if it's possible. But we never found anything, not even a bit of wreckage. She'd gone right in and nothing.
But you did your best, you tried.
Well, we did our best we could. But that was a very upsetting time, that was. After I don't think I did any flying for about a month after that. Well, naturally, if you lose somebody that you've flown with for a long time, they're no fools, you know. The people that run these operations room, they notice what's going on. Yeah. And then going away from the cooking, just for a second, every month, your logbook has to be added in to your section. Now, my book used to go into the armaments, you see, being an air gunner, and they sign it and certify that what you've printed is correct. Because a flight engineer used to log the times. Michael Bennett Pennington, I'll never forget the name. Lovely guy he was. And he used to give me the times, you know, day and night. So I could fill my logbook in.
He was logging the hours on the engine, so he would know exactly how long the plane.
Exactly. He had to keep all that, you see. He was a masterman at working out fuel consumptions. Used to use a slide rule on that.
Quite important if you're out over the North Atlantic in all weather.
Well, yeah. There's more to starting a bloody Pratt & Whitney engine. Anyway, to go back to the food, you said about, was I commended for it? I said yes. But the guys decided to make me, what do you call them? Fish slice?
Yeah, fish slice, yeah.
So they got a piece of Dural, genuine Catalina Dural from down the workshops, and they made me a slice, and they put a ticket on it. They all signed it with various comments on the back. And when old Ron Chivers, I often wonder why, he's down my end, he lives in Char, and he says, me find faulty, stew too salty. And, you know.
All written on the card.
Yeah. And same with the one I'm talking about, going back to the gunnery school, I got the card there with the air entry. They all signed it, and they've all put, I think old Bud Abbott put something like, don't forget your deflection. Yeah. You see? I mean, it all fits in. Yeah. So, yes, I had the fish slice. I wish I'd still got it. I don't know what happened to it. I think down the line, I got an idea it might be just in Oban War and Peace Museum, because I think I sent some of that stuff up to the police sergeant that wrote the book of Oban during the war between 1939 and 46. Now, he was very interested what I told him, and we were talking about 524 Squadron, and he's got it in there about it. If you ever want to, I don't think you've ever read it, have you?
Yes.
Oh, you have.
I read the draft before it was published.
So, the cooking. Back to the cooking. Here we are, flying over the Arctic Circle. I can well remember one day we were over the Arctic Circle, and I was out in I made the tea. I think we'd had the main meal. I always used to try and make either steaks or stew. We'll say, if it was night time, about 11 o'clock at night, and keep the tea going, of course, according to what the skipper wanted, really. Yeah. I mean, they've got a difficult job to keep that thing going for 18 hours. And the engineers keeping their eye on the engines. I can well remember, I was sitting out in the blister, and the skipper called up. He says, "Lou, I think it's time we had some eggs and bacon or something." He said, "I'm bloody famished." I said, "Okay, skipper, I'll get onto it right away." I said, "You do know we got a severe problem with icing, because he can't see the bloody edge of the wings." I said, "I can see the ice building up on the aerial." "Ah, all right," he said, "Luke, we will do something about that." And I think we just lost height, got down lower to get out of the freezing cold. Anyway, so I'm going to cook the eggs and bacon. Well, being very cold, the eggs were practically frozen. So I thought, what am I going to do? So what I did, I boiled the kettle up and I put the bloody eggs in some warm water to thaw them out a bit and then fried them. And so the skipper had, roughly, he'd have 2 eggs, a couple of rashers, a cup of tea, 2 slices of bread and butter. And then that was enough to go do that for each crew, you see. So it went skipper, second pilot, navigator, wireless operators, engineers, and then it'd come down, and then at the end I'd do my own one. And of course we had to do the washing up. Now you're talking about toilet. That trap door in the tail end, what I used to do, peel the spuds, or I used to be put in a pail or bag or something. I used to chuck it out of the tail end. That's where everything went. Then we had one night, that wasn't the only thing that used to get thrown out of there. We had one scare one night. An engineer says, "We got a bit of trouble with the starboard engine." So the skipper says, he says, "I think you'll have to throttle it back." And he said, "You may even have to stop it. I think you've got low oil pressure." So the skipper said, "Well, that's all right." He says, "Come to think of it," he says, "we'll have to lighten the load. Anything that is movable, chuck it out. Can't be everybody that chucked a bloody .5 Browning out of a bloody tail trawler." Yeah, chuck the armament out. Anything to get the weight off it.
And you were heading back for
heading back.
Bow.
Oh yeah, heading back for Sullen Bow. And see.
So you settled down into a bit of a routine then from autumn of 1943.
Yeah.
Right? And then as 1944 progressed, you were still in the Shetlands?
I went back after the 524 fiasco. I went back to the Shetlands.
Yeah. Right, let's carry on from Weedon, right, and your actual demob out of the RAF and the subsequent events.
Well, after the night before at Blackpool and the transport back, which I organised, following morning it's then you get demobbed from the RAF, where you have to hand all your things in. My Smith & Wesson, I would have liked to have kept it, but that had to go. And don't forget, I'd still got my Irving jacket and all my flying gear, because that was on issue, and it all had to go in. Then you go down and get demobbed. I'll never forget it. I had a Mac, I had a pinstripe grey suit, a trilby hat, a couple of shirts, vest, pants, shoes, and that's about it. And your demob papers, which I still got the last issue, the books that I was demobbed with, and for all my misgivings, I was marked up as being superior.
Did they actually put? I've heard about this, but they let you go, but with a proviso, isn't there? If hostilities break out again, they can drag you back.
Yeah. Oh yes. It should have flared up again immediately. There was a I think it's a 5 shilling warrant in there to pay for your ticket to get back to your unit that you're called back to. Although you're demobbed, they can call you back if there was, we'll say if it was an instant flare up again, although it was the end of the war. But eventually, anyway, I was demobbed, and then of course I went up to your mum, who was staying at your granny's with you, and then
what did you think of me then when you saw me? And how old was I?
You were 3 months old. That'd have been now, Alec, wouldn't it?
It would, yeah.
I think.
Yeah.
About this time.
March, April, May, about beginning of June.
Yeah. Anyway.
Ended June, yeah.
So I went in. Of course, I nearly ate your mum. You hadn't seen her for 6 months.
Yeah.
And old George got the bottle out. We had a drink. And I think you were asleep in the cot in the front room. And Margaret said, well, can you go through and see your son? I said, no, give me a chance. So we went in, and I looked. She said, well, pick him up. And later on that day, she said, oh, well, you're going in, you can bath him. But I said, I can't bath him, I might drop him. Anyway, we did get round it eventually. And so I was at home there. Mind you, I'm still drawing money. I don't know how many weeks they paid us after we were demobbed. You could get the money at the post office. He took this book in and he stamped it. I've still got the books and your mum's book that she had. Stamped at different posts. Sholston Post Office, Inverness, are all in the book. What I call my demob book. Well, it is, because it's got all my details when I joined and when I finally left. What medals you'd got and all that rest of that rubbish. Anyway, what am I going to do? Anyway, I found out that there was a garage called Kaybuck, and their mechanic up there, he was a Mr. Stansfield. Nice chap. And he got a car there, I think it was an early Renault. His car. And I think that was about the first civilian car. I borrowed it, and I took you and Mum out to Fort William.
Sure.
In that. I don't know, we went to see someone, but I can't remember who. So long ago. Anyway, I was only at the garage. I only had the job until his other mechanic come back. So, meanwhile, I'd had a letter come through saying, what did I want to do? because I could get training in anything I wanted. And it was a toss-up when I went for carpentry. I went to the Press Steel, which is in Oxford. So I toyed with it. I thought, I'll get to the Press Steel, which was near home. So I went down to Oxford, got the job at the Press Steel, and at that particular time I stayed with your granny's sister May at Peacock Cottage in Sanford. Cycle up to the works, and eventually I was writing to Margaret, and I said, I'm going to try and get us accommodation down here. At that time, your mum was still not right, and I didn't know what to do about housing. It was desperate in Oxford, it probably is today. So I went to a firm called Crappers and bought a pre-war caravan. The only thing I've ever had on my life on hire purchase. And believe you me, it was £500, which was a lot of money just after the war. Anyway, I bought the caravan and I found a site on a farm in Meadow Lane in Oxford. I went to see the farmer. He says, yes, of course you can. He said, it'll cost you 10 shillings a week. I said, what about water supply? He said, there's a tap over the trough in the cow yard. He said, the water's perfectly all right if you've got something to pick it up in. I used to walk up there every day with a can and a bucket and get water for the caravan.
And we're talking here, autumn going into the winter of 1946.
Yeah, that's right. Which was terrible. And that was a turning point in my career because the Press Steel shut down. There was no coal.
And the coldest winter in memory.
That's right. So, what happened then, you and your mother, we didn't have very much money, and I applied to the RF Benevolent Fund, and they gave me £50 to send you with your mum back up to Inverness, right?
Yeah.
So you went back up there, I'm down at the caravan, then I went across, I shut the caravan down and went across to Shalston. And
you were locked out of the Press Steel?
Locked out of the Press Steel, it was shut down completely.
Through lack of coal?
And every other commodity. Yeah. And the weather. So I went to Shalston. I went with your granddad, Percy. I went round the farms. He was doing thrashing at the time. Different areas. I had pictures of it somewhere, but anyway, eventually you came back to the caravan because the following summer was the hottest summer we'd had. I think, was that 1948?
47.
47, 48? And anyway, we stayed in the caravan. I don't know how long we were at the caravan, but then I found that I could get a job at Wootton, at a sawmill. A gentleman from the Three Corners Garage, well, in fact, it was the boss, Mr. Peter Roy Miller Smith. He came in and he got a bit of trouble with these shock absorbers that were going to be fitted on a Hillman Meigs. And he said to Mr. Humphreys, Chuck Humphreys, I wonder if Lou could come over and sort us out. So he said, yeah, of course he can. He'll come out tomorrow. So I went out and fixed these guys up, showed them how to do it. And the owner of the car was very pleased with it. And then a few days afterwards, Peter Smith called into the garage and he came up to me and he said, are you at home this evening, Lou? I said, yeah. He said, what's the number? I said, Pitts Road. I said, you'll find us first cottage. And he said, I'd like to come over and have a chat to you. I said, trouble with the shockers? No, no, no. Something totally different. And what had transpired, he came up to me and he was so pleased that I'd done this job on the shockers, he wanted to know if I would go and work for him. And he said, at the time, he offered me the job, and I think my first pay there was £20 a week. Not a lot of money for what I was doing, but pretty good going in those days.
And I guess this would take us through to about 1956, 57?
Well, yes, probably.
Yeah.
Well,
at the time of Suez.
Eh?
At the time of the Suez crisis, when the army
Oh yes, I
was
remember that.
Yeah, they were painting all lorries
Yeah.
tan colour.
And I believe at that time, during the Suez, I think it came in that one needed, was it indicators or stoplights? Had to be fitted to all cars at the back. I know I fitted no end of them, where you had to bore the hole in the wing and fit these lamps. They're very good lamps anyway. I think some people still use them today, albeit they probably stick LEDs in. Anyway, that's beside the point. Anyway, I take the job there and get on with it and help him build up the garage. And then on the other side of the coin, Mr. Smith, Roy Miller Smith, he joined forces with Mr. Jackson, Benjamin Jackson, who had a builder's business in Bicester. And he was doing up a house at Quainton for the 9th Viscount Portman, Eddie Portman. And of course, Eddie had got cars, and he got an MG at the time, and he said to Mr. Jackson, do you know where I can get my car serviced? So naturally, because I used to do Jackson's cars. Anyway, he sent Eddie down to us. I fixed this oil leak on the back of his MG, and then it led on from there. Well, Eddie got married and moved into the house, complete with swimming pool and God knows what. And everything was going very well. Then he came in one day, he said, I'm thinking of doing a bit of club racing, Lou. And I bought myself a small car. He said, I think you could probably work on it. It's called a Helzelec. I said, what on earth's that? Well, he said it was built by Halls Electrics. And it got an X fire engine pump in it, trying to pump it, which was used during the war. And Morris Minor gearbox, and the back axle was part of it was transverse sprung. And what was the car that was off? Anyway, that's beside the point. Anyway,
so that would be a Coventry Climax.
That's
a water pump.
Yeah,
AFS
off a trailer pump.
Service.
Trailer pump. Yeah. And it even got the crown and the stamp on it. So we raced that for what, 12 months, I suppose, and then he sold it on. And then things moved on then. At that particular time, he was driving a Porsche as his own car. But then he went into Aston Martins, which are beautiful cars. Now, this is where my engineering experience really took off. He bought himself a DB3S Aston Martin, albeit he wanted work on it. Anyway, eventually the car and myself went to Chelford Peters.
Is it near High Wycombe?
Near High Wycombe to the Whitehead brothers, who were racing Aston Martins. I spent 2 weeks down there, and the foreman down there, Arthur Burks, they always said that Arthur knew more about Aston Martins than Aston Martins knew themselves. Now, he'd only found out by working on them for so long, he found different things that weren't quite right, and he'd advised the company to change it to whatever. And I became very friendly with them, and George, the other mechanic. We took the 3S engine down to had it all done, and we found that the block was cracked. So that was professionally welded, rebored and fettled, same with crank, bearings and the rest of it. And then that was assembled back in. Now, I can't remember quite how long we had it, but it was a beautiful car to drive.
How do you know it was a beautiful car to drive then, Dad? Were you allowed to get behind the wheel?
Oh yeah, I used to take you out in it. I have taken you out in it, and it's also been with us when we were at Hillary Way. It was put in the garage there. And what happened, we used to race at Silverstone and go down to Easter Goodwood. I think there's pictures in the photo album, and I think the dates on it as well.
That would have been the 1958 RAC TT races.
Yeah, that's right.
Where they had to there was an enforced pit stop.
Oh yeah.
And I believe you've got a bit of a claim to fame.
Oh yeah, the commentator chappie, John Bolster. That was with the, I think that was with the Houselock, not the Aston Alley. Was it?
You had to change a spark plug on the Aston Martin cylinder head, and I believe the BBC sports commentator John Bolster ruffled your feathers a little bit that day.
Oh yes, I told him to get lost. But
and what happened when you got home to Ringwood Road in Headington? In said Aston Martin.
Oh, you'll have to forgive me, Alec. I can't remember.
All the neighbours came out and said, "Well done, Lou. You told him where to go and what to do with his microphone on live radio and TV."
I'm sorry, but I can't. I can't remember that one. I know I was. He was asking silly questions, and I really told him where to go.
What he said to you was, "Oh, race mechanics always change the spark plug when they don't know what to do." Yeah.
That's right.
And you put him wrong.
No.
Anyway, we'll draw a veil over that. Is there any other anecdotes or bits you want to tell us about Eddie Portman? Did you build any other racing cars for him?
Oh yeah, well things moved on from that. He sold the DB3S, and he came in one day. He said, "Lou," he said, "I'm thinking of going up to John Cooper. I'm going to get one of his cars. It's called a Cooper Monaco." He said, "The only thing is, it has to be built right from the chassis right through to the lot. Do you think you could do it?" I says, "Yeah, I can do the lot, but I can't do it in the garage as it is." And we talked to Pete Smith about it, and we built a special addition to the garage, at the back of the garage, where the floor was perfectly level. I needed it dead level to set all the suspension up and everything on the car. And went up to John Cooper's with Eddie. Yes. Well, there's your car in the corner. All these steel tubes laid out. And built it. And it had a 2-litre Climax engine in it. It had a Hewland, I think it was Hewland gearbox. And at that particular time, I think Eddie said the gearbox cost him 450 quid.
I well remember that the car was 1960 cc's and it was a 1960 construction.
Exactly, that's what I'm coming to.
Yeah.
And the letters on it was MBH.
Yeah. And what was the chassis number? Can you remember the chassis number?
Oh yeah, and that was stamped out on these machines you find on the station. And it got EP stroke LA1. That was Eddie Portman, Ayers, #1. And that was the production. And it was a beautiful car. Another friend of mine, Brian Thrussell, who used to do a lot of our body work and spraying, I said to him, I said, are you going to spray the car? Because the body was aluminium, plain aluminium. It all had to be etched and filled and done and this, that and the other. Oh, he says, I can't do it. He says, but I'll get my uncle to do it. And I do believe he put 8 or 9 coats of paint on there. But it was such, I got it that polished, you could put a rag on the bonnet and go like that and it'd go. It was perfect. Cooper Monaco.
And was the car successful in competition?
Oh yes. We went to Silverstone. The photos in the archive pictures of Eddie with the cup, looking very surprised on his face. And I said, don't stand there, Eddie. Gloating over that. I said, that's one for Christopher. And go out there and get one for your sister, for your daughter, for Claire. And he did.
And then what did he do after that?
Well, after that, he decided he was going to do some flying. So he came down to Kidlington and bought himself a tri-pacer, which you've been up in, and I've been up in, and your granddad McGregor went up in at the time. And a big friend of his, I don't know whether he'd still be at Kidlington Airport, was a Tim Vigers.
Yeah, Vigers Aviation.
That's it.
And Rex Smith, the chief instructor up there.
That's right. Anyway, there again.
Well, Vigers went on to import Brantley helicopters.
Well, that's right. Eddie being Eddie, he decided the tri-pacer, no, he wanted something different. So he decided to buy this Brantley chopper down here, which he flew for a little while, and then during his training period, he did something wrong, dropped it out of the sky and wrote it off. So that was the end of the Brantley chopper.